American workers off. It has hollowed out our middle class. It has destroyed our heartland, and the president is focused on reshifting our global economy to ensure that America is once again the manufacturing superpower of the world.
Fox 25 says at least 4 people were injured, 2 critically, after a truck hit pedestrians on a sidewalk and crashed into a building in Boston today. Emergency crews responding to a report of pedestrians hurt in a crash in the city's Chinatown section just before 1 local time found a Penske rental truck flipped on its side and lodged against a kitchen supply business, according to the Boston Fire Department. Florida voters go to the polls today in 2 districts that have a GOP-friendly history. Matt Carpenter, director of FRC Action, joined Washington Watch to discuss the races in Florida, considering the close margins in the House of Representatives. Democrats are spending a lot of money in the races. He said Matt Gaetz' former district is in the panhandle of Florida and is probably the deepest red district in the nation.
This is a district that President Trump and Matt Gaetz both won in excess of 30 points. I wouldn't be surprised if they hit 40 points. So in that race, you've got Republican Jimmy Patronis. He's the current chief financial officer for the state of Florida, longtime Politico down there in the Sunshine State. And then you've also got Gay Valamont, who's a longtime Democrat candidate there. She challenged Matt Gaetz in 2024. Now she's running for election there. She has vastly outraised and outspent Patronis there, about 6-1. She raised just north of $6 million.
He also talked about the other race to replace Mike Waltz, who's now National Security Advisor. He first talked about the Democrat candidate.
His name is Josh Wheel. He's a first-time candidate out of kind of the south of Jacksonville district here in the 6th district, running against Randy Fine, who's a longtime member of the Florida legislature. He's currently a Florida state senator, and he has raised just shy of $1 million to Josh Wheel's almost $10 million. So as you pointed out, Democrats are just shoveling money into this one.
He went on to say that in early voting, Republicans have outpaced the Democrats in this race. More severe storms are in the forecast for the Central Plains later today and tonight. The Storm Prediction Center says rapid, intense storm development should occur this evening over parts of the Central and Southern Plains. A few supercells with a risk for very large hail and strong tornadoes appear possible, particularly across central Oklahoma into eastern Kansas. Fox Weather's Britta Merwin.
We'll have to really monitor these storms for that ability to produce tornadoes, because these look like supercells that are going to be forming later today across the Central Plains. We do have an upgrade this morning. Yesterday we were a level 2, now we're at a level 3. The jet stream dynamics are set up right over the Central Plains. And Kendall, I always say, if it's crazy up above, it's going to be crazy down below.
Tomorrow, the Storm Prediction Center says numerous severe storms are likely across the lower Great Lakes, mid-Mississippi Valley, and the Arklatex. Attorney General Pam Bondi said today that she has directed prosecutors to seek the death penalty against Luigi Mangione, the man accused of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, following through on the president's campaign promise to vigorously pursue capital punishment. Bondi's order comes weeks after she lifted a moratorium on the federal death penalty that had been imposed under the Biden-Harris administration. Texas Scorecard says Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is fighting back against a federal judge's block of a Texas A&M University drag show ban. The event at the center of the current legal fight is an annual drag show held on the A&M flagship campus in College Station. Paxton has filed a notice of appeal and a motion to stay the ruling, aiming to keep the ban in place while the legal battle plays out. In a statement, Paxton said the Constitution does not require Texas colleges and universities to promote offensive, degrading, and lewd behavior on their campuses. See more news at afn.net.
The recent tornado outbreak has devastated so many people in the Midwest and the South. 8 Days of Hope is ready to deploy their rapid response ministry to Cave City, Arkansas and Tylertown, Mississippi from March 20th to April 5th in order to help those impacted restore what's been destroyed. If you're 18 or older, you can help. Visit 8daysofhope.com to find out how you can volunteer. This is an urgent need. Visit 8daysofhope.com today.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of 4, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite time of the day, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families, and it is a great week. I just want to thank you for tuning in. For all of those of you who are listening, I just appreciate you every single day wherever you are. We hear from listeners all over who are driving trucks, bringing much needed supplies across the country. We have people who are patrolling the streets, keeping us safe. I have what I call my army of grannies out there who are taking care of kids, and they're listening as they're sitting in the pickup line or folding laundry, or maybe you're at work, or maybe you're on a walk. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, it's so encouraging to me that you would tune in here to American Family Radio and that you would look for hope for healthy families. It is encouraging to know that we are not alone. And if you've been listening in since January, you know we're on a journey to develop 52 habits for healthy families. On Friday, we'll continue that. You can go back and listen to the Dr. Nurse Mama coaching minutes and catch up, just 1 minute, little coaching minutes to give you healthy habits for your family, starting with spiritual disciplines. And then we talked about some family rhythms. And this last 4 weeks or so, we're spending some time in communication skills. It has been deeply convicting for me, and I hope convicting for you. And I've heard from some of you. And today we are talking to someone who has a lot of excellent communication skills. Some of you, as you hear her start to talk, you're going to wonder, wait, what time is it? Is it 2:00? No, we have Sandy Rios on the show. Sandy Rios, host of Sandy Rios 24/7, right here live with us at 2:00. And Sandy, we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for taking your time to join us today.
I've been looking forward to this, Jessica. Ever since you asked me, because I think you're kind of new to the air there. And of course, I was on for 10 years on the morning show, but I listened to a couple of your podcasts or your shows, and I was really impressed with what you're doing. You have a lot of natural gifts. I mean, your voice is great for radio, and the way you love the Lord comes through your voice. And all of your experiences, which I don't know so much about, but I see them on paper. I'm sure all of that will go to make you just a life-giving host for the afternoon. So welcome to AFR Talk.
Well, that is a big compliment coming from you, Sandy. And, I'm a dinosaur in the nursing world, but a baby in the radio world. And American Family Radio has given me such a warm welcome. And I appreciate your compliment about my voice. My kids say, POV, your mom's voice is good. ASMR's for sleeping is what they will say. But that is okay. And really reading all of your accomplishments and everything that you have done, which I'm just learning about more and more, Sandy, and knowing through reading your book, I am going to estimate that you must be about 128 years old, given all that you've done in your life.
Like I'm 128 years old, but I'm not quite there. Wikipedia used to add like 20 years to my age because they hated me.
How rude!
I've been 80 something for 20 years, I think. I'm not kidding. It's really funny. It's like, oh my gosh. But
I mean it as a compliment.
I'm not young anymore.
I mean it as a compliment because I thought,
thank you.
What do we talk about, Sandy? Do we talk about, we did your radio show in Moscow. Do we talk about your time with Mike Ditka and singing the national anthem for the Chicago Bears and this fabulous fur coat? Do we talk about your former husband winning the Mexico City Olympic Games? Do we talk about you walking through Berlin, East Berlin, in red, white, and blue bell bottoms? Do we talk about you being in North Korea on 9/11? I mean, there are so many things. You see why I say I can't believe you packed so many experiences into one lifetime. But I would love for just some of our listeners who may be newer to American Family Radio, for you just to tell a little bit about your growing up and your parents and how God brought you, how you came to know the Lord.
Okay. Well, I was from a very small town and we'll never forget that. I love it. My town has 6,000 people. That's it. My parents, in fact, we came from a little place that was called Concord, and it had a post office, and that was it. That was out in the country. So we moved into town when I was 5, 6,000. My parents came through the Depression. They were from Oklahoma, the Dust Bowl, hard living. Some of those pictures are in my book of the hard times that they had. But grew up in Christian culture, but not church. And so neither of them really were believers in Christ until I was about 8 years old. And my mother had we moved to town, the 6,000 people town, and my mother made friends with a woman who was a strong believer. She told my mom. My mom actually would say that her life was so difficult that she was driving into town from the country one day, and she had just gone, she used to make her clothes out of gunny sacks when she was a kid, flour sacks. She had gone to town and had been able to buy patterns and material, which to her was like gold. She was going to be able to make really nice things for her and for her kids. And she said, as she was gripping the steering wheel, the sun came out, and she felt God's presence for the first time in her life. She felt overwhelmed with gratefulness and called out to him in praise, even though she didn't know him. And that's actually the beginning of my mother's journey. There's more, of course, to it. They both actually, my mother became a Christian, and my dad was kind of a wild man. And for 2 weeks, he couldn't stand that she was in church all the time. It was like he'd lost his wife. And so finally, at the end of 2 weeks, my parents were both on their knees in our little house at the couch, and I'm sitting in a chair not far from them, watching them with the pastor pray to receive Christ, at least my dad did. So that's how it started, Jessica, and my whole life changed. And I later, I wasn't a Christian just because they were. In fact, to make it simple, I just had a powerful encounter with Christ when I was almost 9 years old. And I just felt God calling me, and I fought it for over a year, even as a young girl, with no words to express it. Every time we were in church, I was miserable, and I felt God just calling me, and I kept saying, no, whatever that is, no. And so finally, this sounds like a silly story, and I'll end with this. You can ask me something else, but my big sister was 7 years older, and we slept together. And one night, this was unusual, she stayed with a friend. And I was alone in the bed, and I was scared to death. And my dad's snoring was keeping me up, and I was just miserable. And God then honestly came into that bedroom, the Holy Spirit, and just started calling me. And I was just tossing and turning in that bed. No, not even understanding it, Jessica, except this was my prayer. I finally said, well, okay, God, if you'll let me sleep, I'll say yes. And that's actually how my journey started. I fell asleep immediately, woke up the next morning early, and started singing hymns. And that's how it started.
I think that's beautiful. And it reminds me of Paul's conversion and on the road to Damascus, because when people have an encounter with God, Sandy, they can't deny it. I mean, it's hard sometimes to explain to other people, but there's so many testimonies, your mother's, yours, and so many others, where people just encounter God. And, I had a similar experience when I was about your age. I was actually on a field trip, and we had gone crabbing at a creek off of this little dock. And I remember just, standing there in the sunshine, and it was a very benign kind of day, but I remember God calling me by name. I remember having an encounter with God and feeling like my life was never the same, that was the moment my faith became personal. And again, like you said, when you try to explain it to somebody else, it can sound like, really? But when you've experienced it, and you say, oh yeah, I know that moment. And Sandy, you went on, to do the kinds of things that were really expected at that age. You got married and you had a baby. And I we're skipping over so much of your story, but if we were going to cover your story, it would have to be about a 5-year mini-series, I feel like. So I'm picking the highlights.
Can I choose who plays me? I think I'll choose you, Jessica.
Oh my goodness, really? I don't know if I could do that. I will try. I will very try. It would be so fun, let me tell you, because you've had so many adventures. But really, for me, as a mom, as a nurse, I really want to talk about Sasha. Sasha is your daughter, and I want you to talk about the story of when she was born, because I encounter so many parents who have a similar experience that you did, and I just want to take a moment to celebrate her life and talk about that. But talk to us about when Sasha was born.
Let me back up just a little bit, Jessica, before that actual event. When I moved to Berlin, Germany, I was 21 years old, and I was married to my first husband. That was my first husband. And there was, everything I said is absolutely true about God's call, and it stayed there. But I had some years of rebellion and could not forgive myself. And I had, just before we went to Berlin, I had an incredible renewal of my faith. Not new faith. It was like understanding grace for the first time in my life. And God was working mightily. I was just in his word all the time. And I prayed constantly, Lord, whatever you want, I never want to be apart from you again. I will do anything. I will go anywhere. And it wasn't an isolated prayer. It was a frequent prayer. And it was a joyful prayer because of the communion with him. So we moved to Berlin, and it was pretty exciting because that was during the Cold War, and it was Berlin had more spies per square mile than any city in the world. So that's all I can say about it. This time, Checkpoint Charlie was there, lots of tension between communism and capitalism in the United States. So in the midst of this, I had always wanted a baby. I loved babies. I would babysit with anybody all the time. I just loved babies. I loved dolls, and I longed for a baby. So I got pregnant, and honestly, Jessica, I couldn't even sleep at night for anticipating what it was going to be like to have a baby. And one night I had a dream, a very vivid dream I'll never forget. There was a little girl who came to the side of my bed. She had long, dark hair, and she just stood there in my presence. That's really all that happened, except when I woke up, it just seemed so real to me. So I got pregnant with her in Berlin, came back to the States 6 or 7 months pregnant, and went to the doctor, and I really didn't know anything. I know this sounds so weird to people now, but I honestly didn't know anything about childbirth, except that my mother said to me, Sandra Kay, childbirth is the next thing to death. That was my training.
Goodness.
Oh, I'm not kidding.
That's terrible.
I'm not kidding. My mother grew up hard, and so no details though. And so I went to my first doctor's appointment in the States, and they gave me a pamphlet, and I'm sitting in the back seat of my parents' car because my husband was still in Berlin. I started looking at these pictures, Jessica, and I said to myself, what have I gotten myself into? And I just panicked. I was scared to death to go through that process. And in the backseat of that car, I just felt God again speaking to me, saying, well, I just cried out to him, please, Lord, help me not to be afraid. Give me courage. Help me not to be afraid. So fast forward, I was again with my parents. My water broke early in the morning. So we headed in the dark, and there was a brand new sliver of a moon and a brand new morning star. And the song God just filled me with a song. It was, I've seen him in the lightning, heard him in the thunder, and felt him in the rain. My Lord is near me all the time. My Lord is near me all the time. Over and over and over, I kept singing that till I got into the hard labor. The hospital was about an hour away. By noon, I was just in terrible pain, having terrible contractions. And Sasha, my soon-to-be-born daughter, was already crowning. I didn't know the name of it then, and yet I couldn't give birth. She just wouldn't come. So they hooked me up to a monitor. That's the early days of monitors, and I could hear her heart beating, and I could hear it just going ta-dum, 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 and then it would stop, and it would start again. I'll tell you the rest in a minute. I know.
Oh my goodness, what a cliffhanger. That is, okay, do not go away because you're going to want to hear the rest of this story. I'm telling you, I read it as a mom, as a nurse. I was deeply moved. And Sandy, I believe you that you didn't know anything because What to Expect When You're Expecting wasn't even published till 1984. And it's hard to explain the world before the internet when we didn't have access to information. But Sandy has a remarkable testimony of faith, determination, courage, resilience in so many ways, but we'll talk more about the life of her daughter, Sasha, when we come back. Don't go away. I'll be right back with Sandy Rios, host of Sandy Rios 24/7.
AFA Stream is your source for inspirational, informational, educational, and entertainment video content from American Family Association. You'll find documentaries like Culture Warrior, Don Wildman and the Battle for Decency.
Television in those days would be considered extremely mild as to what's available today.
You can access educational curriculum like Body of Evidence.
And there the Lord says, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them.
You'll find titles like Life is a Civil Right from the AFA Cultural Institute.
If you're Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece and you were tricked, my goodness, how many more were tricked?
Much of the content is free to everyone. Great Commission partners can see even more. And content is being added, so your options are increasing. Visit stream.afa.net and see what you like. AFA Stream, streaming video from American Family Association.
Wherever the gospel goes, lives are changed. Lives like Sonia's. When Sonia came to a Tomorrow Club, she had little reason to hope for a better future.
As Armenian refugees living in a remote community in the Republic of Georgia, life was desperately hard for Sonia and her family. The recent death of her baby brother had made things even worse, and her mother had fallen into a deep depression. At the club, Sonia heard the gospel and her faith began to grow as she attended weekly club meetings. Soon, a small church grew out of the Tomorrow Club, and Sonia prayed her mother would come to the church. Sonia's prayers were answered. Her mother came, surrendered her life to Christ, recovered from her depression, was baptized, and now leads the Tomorrow Club where her daughter found Christ.
Partnering with local churches, Tomorrow Clubs help kids and teens in forsaken places learn to follow Jesus through long-term discipleship. To learn more about how Tomorrow Clubs are reaching young hearts and minds for Christ, visit tomorrowclubs.org. That's tomorrowclubs.org. All gifts are tax deductible.
The Word of God tells us many times in one form or another, fear not. Many people are very fearful about some of the many perils and dangerous happenings that are going on in the world. Psalm 91 verses 1 and 2 tell us, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him I will trust. I'm Joseph Parker, and we here at the American Family Association would like to remind you, fear not, put your trust in the Lord. We'd like to both encourage and challenge you to aggressively put your faith to work. And one way to do that is to pray Psalm 91 daily for yourself and your family, and keep your trust in him. If you'd like to get a copy of the Psalm 91 prayer for yourself, email us here at psalm91@afa.net. Again, that's psalm91@afa.net.
I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again.
Welcome back, friends. That is Run to the Father by Cody Carnes, and that is what we're talking about today. We're talking to Sandy Rios, host of Sandy Rios 24/7 right here on American Family Radio. Such an extraordinary life story. She's written about it in her book, God's Velvet Hammer, how an ordinary girl was called to do extraordinary things. And she's been sharing with us her story of running to the Father over and over again through the mountains and the valleys in her life. And before the break, she was just telling us a story about the birth of her daughter, being in the hospital and listening to her precious heartbeat on the monitor. And Sandy, I'll give it back to you there.
Okay, well, this was, again, the early days of heart monitors, but we knew that my mother was with me. So the heartbeat would continue to get faster and faster, then stop, but we didn't know anything. And the entire day I didn't see the doctor at all. I went through several shifts of nurses. I was fully dilated probably 8 centimeters by 8 or 9 by noon. But Sasha would not come. They could see her hair. And of course I knew nothing. And my mother really knew nothing except Sandra Kay, childbirth is the next thing to death. And I thought, well, so it's going as planned, And so I'm gripping the bed rails. It was really frightening, and not to be too graphic, I'm vomiting bile. I was really hurting. And so my mother's reading scripture, and she's, very concerned about me. But Jessica, here's the thing. Remember that prayer in the back seat of the car when I was so afraid when I looked at that brochure? I was never afraid. During that entire labor, I never lost my courage and determination. And honestly, that is supernatural. Sasha didn't actually, an older nurse finally came in 8 or 8:30 at night. And she said, honey, the doctor's going to help you. He's going to give you whatever it was called, where they, a saddle block. Yeah. A saddle block is what they called it then. Yeah. And, I said, is it going to hurt? And she said, honey, it'll be just like heaven. And so they took me into the delivery room, and it was just like heaven when he gave me the saddle block. And Sasha was born, and I jabbered like a magpie, Jessica, because I just jabbered. Blah, 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 blah. So I was thrilled. She had a ton of black hair. Her face was all mushed. Her head was all messed up, but I was so grateful. And I could tell the story in a lengthy way, as you know, but I won't. I'll just say that my husband came back from Berlin, and we moved to a university where he was going to graduate school. We were in married student housing. And one day I was 3 months after we'd gotten there, it was October, I was burping her after nursing her, and her body stiffened, and she began to jerk. Well, I never experienced anything like that. We dropped everything, went to the emergency room. It was a small town, college town with no physician on duty. So they kept telling us to we went back 3 times that day. She had like 12 grand mal seizures. We finally realized what it was. Went to an emergency room in a town about 10 miles away, and found a wonderful pediatrician named Ankar Sharma. I'll never forget him. But, Jessica, that was just the beginning. He did every test he knew how to do. He had to shave her head, which just killed me. Mm-hmm. That was the first thing that made me realize that this was serious and maybe permanent. So I would just say that she was I had a sense that something was wrong, almost from the beginning. She had trouble nursing, and I just had a sense. I think mothers have a sense. But it didn't show up until she was 3 months old. And so that was the beginning of hospitalizations. We took her to St. Louis Children's Hospital. We had her at Pittsburgh I can't even think of the name of the clinic, but it's been so long. Also California, UCLA, we lived out there, and she went to a special program there. We did everything. We went to Mayo Clinic. We went everywhere we could go, just trying to find an answer, a cure, a medication, a treatment. But there really wasn't anything. And so when she was on her first birthday, Jessica, she went into a bout of horrible grand mal seizures where she was turning blue and jerking and just over and over. And I was at my parents' house, and they also did not have a hospital. It was that little town I told you about. So we go, my husband was gone. He was overseas running. And it was my sister, my dad, my mother. And we went to the little tiny emergency room in that little tiny hospital. And they took Sasha, and I went into the room where she was going to be assigned. And honestly, Jessica, I felt nothing. I didn't want to hold her. I didn't have any emotion at all. I suppose I just went into shock after a year of that. And so my parents came into the room, my sister also, where we were waiting for them to bring her in. And they were in no shape to do anything like I'm going to mention. I just said to them, like automatic nerve, like riding a bicycle when you haven't been on in 20 years, I said, we have to pray. With no feeling. And, but I knew they couldn't pray. So I just bowed my head, and I'm always an honest prayer. I don't believe in flowery words or unnecessary things. I just said, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. And honestly, Jessica, that was a turning point in my life. And why is that? Because in that moment, I was learning what real faith is. That it's not if we wish for something, if we cross our fingers hard enough, we ask God enough, He's going to do what we ask, and then that means we have great faith. No, it means that in spite of our circumstances, our hardships, our heartaches, no answers, like in the time frame that we want them, we trust Him because of His character and because we know He loves us. So blind trust, faith in a God that for me, I knew who he was. He'd been present in my life, and he had carried me that far, and I chose to just continue to serve him even though I didn't understand. But I don't want to make it sound simple. It wasn't simple. It was 20 years I took care of her in my home, and it was a constant act of faith by my will, sometimes not by my feeling. Just, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. I trust you, Lord. I trust you. Because she was sick a lot. She had fevers, and it was a hard path. But she was also absolutely delightful. Beautiful child, sweet, like a little baby doll when she was little, just a perfectly beautiful little girl. That changed in time. Didn't become beautiful. The seizures ravaged her body. She'd have steroids, so all of that changed. But honestly, Jessica, the thing that's hardest to explain to people who are around disability or not around it or don't have it in your life is you understand to some degree the difficulty and the sorrow, but you don't understand the joy that they bring. Most people just can't understand that unless you've had a child like this in your life or you've worked we had a facility where I finally placed Sasha when she was 20. And the people there just loved her. When she died, they came in droves to her funeral. It's a thing, again, it's almost like that experience with God and his power that's hard to explain. This is hard to explain too.
It is hard because when I read about Sasha's story, it seems that what they eventually came to the conclusion, her physicians, her medical team, was that she had experienced a birth injury and developed cerebral palsy. And looking back at that, Sandy, it would be so easy to be bitter, to be angry. And just like you said, I think your transparency in saying, God, I don't understand this, but to still say that God is good, that he is faithful, that he was working through those circumstances, that is very difficult to do when you're facing circumstances like this. And during this time, Sandy, you experienced divorce as well. And you were very transparent about that. And you were singing at the time, having a very successful singing career, but doing that to support yourself. But being a Christian singer who experienced divorce, who also was taking care of a daughter who required so much. By this time, you had a son as well, a younger son. How can you still look and say that God is good? That is the question that people want to answer. How is your faith still so unshakable?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for all of us. Look, it's not an easy lesson to learn, but since I've learned it, I can speak with authority. God is the truth of God and the reality that he's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, that he created all things and he has a plan for this world and an awesome future for all of us that love him. That won't change no matter what my circumstances are. This may sound harsh and maybe hard for people to hear, but this really, truly is not about me. And yet God does care about me. I mean, I came to the point where I was willing, look, I'm slogging along and I'm trusting you, but I can't say, look, I was in a hard place, Jessica, in a very difficult marriage. We were struggling financially and I was struggling with her illness. So I don't know that I had a lot of happy places except in my worship. And I realized truthfully that the only thing I really had, no matter what, was my relationship with him. And I grew so close to him that, no matter what, I didn't want to lose that. And there was joy in his presence that has nothing to do with circumstances. And I know you know that. And so the truth of God doesn't have anything to do with what's the bad things happening in my life. And, the growing in faith makes you understand that. But now here's the rest of the story. I can't tell all the rest of the story, but let me just say, God resolved things in my marriage, not as I couldn't fix it. I was not capable. And that ended, and that was hard. But also, then Sasha, I had to take, it was necessary for me to place her in a home, which just killed me. But that was when God began to pour blessings out in my life and bring opportunities that I would never, in my small town girl mind, have thought to ask. Not a thing. A radio show and the drive time in Chicago, Illinois, third market in the country. A phone call out of the blue. a radio show of my own. I mean, you can't just do that, Jessica. People usually have to, you don't go just deciding you want to do that. It doesn't work that way. And so that was a miracle. And then a trip to Russia as a reporter, which I had never done reporting. I had always been singing when I traveled. And so that was, who knew that God was going to take me into serious, I don't know what you call it, punditry, or I already had a very big interest in the world, and I had traveled a lot, but and I had a lot of opinions, and I knew a lot about history, but I never dreamed that God was going to call this girl who sang and played the piano to actually talk, be a Fox News contributor, be the head of Concerned Women for America in Washington, D.C., to lead so many fights there that had nothing to do with music. But all of these adventures were foundationally placed on these early years, where I was beaten to a pulp spiritually in other ways, and God was just building me up spiritually. And when things got really bad in D.C., where I was fighting so many of these battles on the front lines, I remember one time I had 3 full assistants for me, just for me, for my schedule, for radio, for television, for the other stuff, and they were wonderful. And they all came to me like an intervention. They were worried about me because I was under so much pressure. And when they did that, I just burst out laughing. I started laughing. I said, okay, girls, you haven't seen anything until you have been sitting in your family room by yourself, nobody around, and your daughter starts to have a grand mal and throw up on you, and your baby is screaming with colic, and you can't get up. That's pressure. This is not pressure. So that's funny, actually, because it's really not like when the very core of you is shaken like it was for me. The stuff that happened in D.C., there was not much fear in me. Because what are they going to do to me? What are they going to do to me? I've already just given all. So here I am. I'm going to fight the fight, and whatever happens to me, happens to me. And I trust you, Lord. I don't understand some of this stuff, but I trust you. And so that's, yeah.
I see that, Sandy. I see your character being forged and God preparing you for the pressures that you would have. And you're so right. As a mom, there's nothing scarier than seeing your child literally at the point of death and in a health crisis, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Those kinds of things are absolutely terrifying, and they give you the gumption and the grit and the grace that you need to go and the motivation that you need to have those fights for other kids, so that you can make the world a better place. And we're already up against a break. See, I told you, Sandy, this is like a 5-year mini series. I'm just going to consider this the introductory. But when we come back from break, one of the things that I want to ask you about in talking about your character being forged during that time, there was a passage in your book that really pulled my heart, and you talked about the aftermath of your divorce. And you said this, Sandy, you said, divorced women, it seems to me, often take the course of widely berating their former husbands, sometimes I think to justify the divorce, or perhaps other times out of their great pain. I was determined not to do that to my children or my former husband. People would have to think what they wanted to think, and God would justify me in his own time and in his own way. And, I want to talk about that a little bit more, Sandy, because I see so many families who struggle with this. We know that about half of families experience divorce or some kind of, marriage separation in their lives. And it is so hard. And I see the children in all of this. And I think of what a great gift you gave your son to do that, and what trust you must have had, because it's so in our human nature to think, oh, let me tell you the story. Once I tell you, you'll understand, and then I'll have understanding and sympathy. And how do you let go of caring about what other people think about you? That's what I want to know when we come back. Again, friends, there's so much to talk about. I do want to know about you being in North Korea on 9/11 too. That was really compelling. We'll see what comes up when we come back. Don't go away. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back with Sandy Rios, host of Sandy Rios 24/7. See you in just a minute.
In Denver, Colorado, Jamie Sanchez obeyed the Lord's call and opened the Drip Cafe to create jobs to help unhoused people get back on their feet. Of course, the LGBTQ community began persecuting him for his Christian beliefs. His inspiring story of standing boldly for God's truth in the face of great opposition is part of our Impact series, and we'll send you the DVD as our thanks for your gift to AFA. Visit afa.net/spiritual war. afa.net/spiritual war.
When you hear this,
this is American Family News.
You know what follows is the truth. Your news from a Christian perspective.
Hundreds of teachers are going to have to walk into that school building, and they are forced to swallow political ideology that in many cases violates their very faith and conscience.
If you miss it at the top of the hour, American Family News podcasts are available at afn.net. And sign up for our daily news brief at afn.net.
Share-a-thon is coming up, and it occurred to me the other day, we've probably had Share-a-thon longer than I've been alive. Some of my first memories are of causing ruckus in Share-a-thon Central. And for many years, I have seen some of the same volunteers from all those years ago coming back and taking calls to help support the ministry.
Spring Share-a-thon is coming April 8th through 10th, and it's your chance to partner with American Family Radio.
Some years back, I realized Share-a-thon is not just a childhood memory for me, but it's an integral part of the ongoing ministry of AFR. Some people might not remember Share-a-thons as far back as I do, but most of our ministry partners have realized the importance of Share-a-thon for funding this ministry. And now, after all these years, I'm actually on the air as well as behind the scenes at AFR. And Share-a-thon is much more than just a place to play, but it's still a lot of fun.
Be listening April 8th through 10th for Spring Share-a-thon on American Family Radio.
Hello, this is Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, we've got some very average tours lined up for you in 2025. And so if you are interested in any one of these, we would love for you to join us. Again, the food will be so-so. We're using yellow school buses this time, and we're not making reservations at any of the places we're going, so it'll be hit and miss. But if you just like to live on the wild side when you tour, then we got a tour for you in 2025. We're going to Williamsburg, we're going to Washington, D.C., and we're going to Boston. Williamsburg and D.C. in June and September, and Boston in October. For all the information on these tours, go to wildmangroup.com, WILDMON group.com, and there you can find out if I'm really serious. I'm just kidding, folks. These are going to be outstanding tours that you're going to want to go on with us.
Welcome back, friends. That's My King by CeCe Winans, and we're talking to a lady today, an extraordinary lady who calls herself God's Velvet Hammer. Her name is Sandy Rios. She has lived a life where she has lived out her convictions with strength and conviction. She has followed her faith, experienced a lot of difficult things, but a lot of extraordinary things that she has done. I shared with you some of those at the beginning, but she has been in China and India. She's been interviewed by any major news pundit you can possibly imagine. She's been in the White House, all of these things. But we are talking today about the time in her life where God really forged her faith. We're talking about her daughter, Sasha, being born with a birth injury resulting in cerebral palsy, about her faith through that. And right before the break, I was asking her about the divorce that she encountered during this time. And as a Christian singer and a public figure, that was really hard. But you said in your book, Sandy, that you were determined to not berate your husband in public and to let God fight that battle for you. Can you just speak to that? Because I think there's so many people who would relate to that and struggle with that. How was that an act of obedience and faith for you?
Well, I think I have seen so many women destroy their husbands, and maybe their husbands are jerks. Maybe they deserve this criticism, but I just don't feel that I've seen it just do such damage, especially to the children. And I just don't think it's right. One of the things that when we separated, one of the things that came to my mind was, things are always so messy. When something like that happens, it's so messy. Life is just not perfect. And you feel out of control. And I remember saying, Lord, just help me to honor you through this. Help me to honor you. Help me to honor you. And I was determined not to say, it was nobody's business. Nobody's business. My parents, my best friends, maybe, one or two, but my pastor, but nobody else's. Nobody deserves to know all of the stuff about why you don't have to, and I think it's really wrong of Christians and church leaders to expect a full telling or excuse or explanation for divorce in order to have some scriptural basis or to be justified. I think someone in the church does need to know. And there needs to be someone vetting reasons and holding people accountable. But not everybody needs to know. And I was a public person, so I remember, I'll just tell you one thing that happened to me. there's a big church in town that I had sung there many times, done concerts, and I went by myself on a Sunday night just because I wanted to worship. And I felt stares. I just felt people staring, not friendly stares. So one time, I'll give you an example. Jessica, I was in a grocery store and I'd done an infomercial, and they hired a person to change my look, be in charge of my look. They cut my hair, shaped it, and made me a blonde. This was for an infomercial. So I go to the grocery store, and a person that I knew not well, but knew her, but she was in our church. She said to me, I see you're a blonde now. It's like,
scandalous.
Oh, yeah, really. Well, anyway, so I went to this church and I felt those stares. And this is what God gave me. It's 1 Corinthians 4:3. I care very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. I'm sure in my own mind that I have done nothing, or I have not done anything wrong, but that does not make me right. Only the Lord himself can judge me. So you should not decide about things before the time is right. Wait until the Lord comes again. He will show everything clearly. He will show the bad things that people have done secretly. He will show the secret purposes of people's thoughts. And then God will praise each person in a way that's right for them. Now that's not King James, but it really ministered to me. It's like God is going to handle this. I do not have to convince people of anything. And I'm not going to. And, a lot of people that really knew me, trusted me. I remember Moody Broadcasting. They used to play my music a lot on the radio there because I actually started radio on Moody years ago. Not full time, but, the head of radio at Moody came to me, Bob Neff, and he said, Sandy, we understand your circumstances and we are not taking your music off the air here. Because that's what was happening in those days. They would take, and I don't have a problem with that. If there was a bad divorce or bad behavior, they would remove the music. And I didn't have to tell him anything, but he just knew. And so I just would say to anyone going through this, women, please, God has given us the ability to verbalize. And boy, we do verbalize, but don't use your abilities to destroy that man who is your children's father. What is the point? Live yourself, clean up your own act, do what's right, concentrate on you, and God will deal with him. Spare your children from the rancor and dividing them and hurting them in that way. That's as much of a sin as he's been unfaithful to you. That's as much, you destroy him, that's just as bad. So, that's the end of my lecture on that.
Well, you speak from a place of authority, Sandy. And to finish, I want to read one more quote from your book, because you said, to be clear, I absolutely hold the biblical view that divorce should not be taken without biblical reasons. Marriage remains a sacred vow that should not be broken, but I was not going to share the details of mine in order to save my own reputation. God would take care of that, and he would take care of me. and my 10-year-old boy and 16-year-old girl with severe disabilities. I trusted him. My fervent prayer was that I would honor him in the way I conducted myself as a single woman, and if not, as a Christian musician, I would serve him in new ways. And that's when the phone rang. And Sandy, that is when your life took a completely different direction. And there's so many different things that we could talk about, but one of the moments that stood out to me in your book is going from that moment thinking, this is even before cancel culture, right? We even called it a thing, but thinking, what am I going to do to provide? And then all of a sudden you find yourself in North Korea on September 11th, 2001. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Well, of course, that was a culmination of several years of going into public media, doing the drive time show in Chicago. That's the phone calls I was talking about. Yeah, God just took my life and just said, okay, fasten your seatbelt because here we go. And so, North Korea, I worked for Salem Communications, and they used to take about 10 or a dozen of us that were from major cities around the country to foreign places. We would do interviews just about persecution. We did interviews in China with the underground church. We were in some very North Vietnam because it was a communist country. I was in I can't even think, Thailand, lots of places like that. So the last trip I did with them, and it was before I was going to move to Washington, D.C. to become the president of Concerned Women for America, was not North Korea, it was China. And we happened to be in China in northern Manchuria, and it was on the border between of North Korea. And so someone came to us and said, do you want to go into North Korea? There were just 6 of us that were allowed to do that. It's a long story how that happened, Stephanie, but let me just say, yes, of course we would. But you have to understand that when you do something like this, there's no protections for you. If there's any problems there, any accidents, anything, you're on your own. And so we went. When I lived in Berlin, there was Checkpoint Charlie that divided East and West Berlin. That was one of the passageways. And as you would drive through the tank barriers, the guards would have their guns pointed at you, and you'd go through those tank barriers, and it was very dangerous. And then you came into East Berlin, and it was silent, communistic control, frightening. And so that was my experience the first time with that. But fast forward to this was 2001. The Tumon River was the dividing place between northern Manchuria, which is in China, and North Korea. And there was a bridge, the Tumon Bridge. And so when we crossed that bridge, same thing. Guards, it's outdoors though. They've got their guns pointed at you and you're crossing over. We couldn't take anything, car or anything. They had to provide transportation. They provided 2 people, guides, but the reason they had 2 was because they had to watch each other. They did not trust guides to be by themselves with people like us. And hardly anybody at that time, Jessica, any American, was going into North Korea. This was unheard of. And so I'm just trying to figure out how we ended up meeting with people who were hiding in homes in northern Manchuria, who would swim across the Tumon River for food because the people were starving to death in North Korea. And when you got into North Korea, it was complete, of course, communist propaganda control. Another thing that struck me is the women dressed like the 50s. Like there was a lot of military. If you've seen any movies of the Korean War or the World War II, there's a certain look that women have with a cap, and that's how the women dressed. It was like they were frozen in time because they couldn't get any outside information. And to underscore that, while we were in North Korea, 9/11 took place back in New York City, and we knew nothing about it. Nothing. We came back across the Tumon River after we'd spent a night or 2, I can't remember, to be honest with you. And when we got into this restaurant in northern Manchuria, the owner said through an interpreter, "Do you guys know what happened? Do you know these airlines went into the Twin Towers and this and that?" And honestly, I thought he was crazy. I said there were 6 of us, and one of the guys was from New York City. His name was Andy. I said, "Andy, is he crazy? He's got to be crazy." So he Andy had a satellite phone. He called his wife back in New York City, and she confirmed exactly what that man had said and told us that that's the first we'd heard of it. So we went back. We couldn't eat. Took our food and ran behind our hosts, who were actually American Koreans, and went up into, in the dark, up to the top floor of this apartment building and got in there, and they turned the television on. And in Korean, we watched all of this happen. There was no editing. We saw all the bodies dropping, everything. And honestly, Jessica, I'm on the floor and I'm just back and forth on my knees, just weeping and weeping. And I thought, my kids are back in the United States. Will I ever see them again? Is this the beginning of World War III? Those were the things that were going through my mind. And so ended up, we were stranded in Beijing for about 10 days, and I flew back through L.A. The L.A. airport was just empty. And there's a lot to say about this, but 2 weeks later, I reported for work in Washington, D.C. at Concerned Women for America, and the whole world had changed. But and I ended up being chosen to be the chairman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition. That's the first time we'd had one in D.C., and I was their chairman. So there's a lot to say about that. The people that we met, the persecuted people in those countries. Of course, all of that impacted my already strong faith. It just confirmed it. And it was a foundation for me to understand the world so that I could lead a national organization with a worldwide view of God's work in the world. So,
you know, it is amazing to see what you've come through. You start your book talking a lot about your experience in East Berlin at the Berlin Wall, and just I could feel the fear coming up off of the pages during that. It just seemed like such a frightening time. And, you know, I remember where I was when the Berlin Wall, I was actually a teenager and I was babysitting. But, you know, we have generation who don't remember how that was. And now we have a generation who didn't live through 9/11. We have children who were born after that. And the world is changing. The world is changing so much. And we see that through some of these, you know, really big things that you've talked about. And just in our last minute together, Sandy, what advice would you give to people in standing firm in your faith and knowing that God is good, even when the world is not?
Well, I think, of course, you have to be in the Word. You have to have knowledge of God's Word. And faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. So when you get that in your head and you understand, things kind of fall into place. I was in a refugee camp in Thailand one time, and it was a Buddhist camp where there'd been like a revival, and there were a lot of Christians. And I interviewed one. I was sitting on a bamboo mat on my knees with him about 3 feet away from me. And he was a Buddhist who had just become a Christian. And I asked him through an interpreter, what difference does it make in your life? How does it change anything? And he said, it has changed the way I think about everything. And I'll never forget that, Jessica. And I would say my husband, who was an FBI agent, said the same thing to me after he became a Christian, after we met. It has changed the way I think about everything. If you know Jesus through his word, it will change the way you think about everything. It will change your optimism for the future, your hope, the way you deal with problems, and give you perspective. And I can't wait, honestly, Jessica, to get to heaven and see my daughter. That's a great perspective right there.
That is a beautiful perspective, that we serve a God who redeems, who restores, who renews, who will make all things new. And this world is not our home. We have an eternal future to look forward to that is much better than the alternative. Sandy, thank you for sharing your extraordinary story of faith as God's velvet hammer. And to our listeners, wherever you are, I pray the Lord will bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
How do you choose to stay informed? Sure, you can find all kinds of sources for information and commentary, but when you want them from a Christian